Okay.
Conversation to the next steps. Our Emily Wakeman joins us.
Good evening, it is that time. Let me go ahead on and call the County Council meeting for June 2nd to order. Let me ask Ms. Roberts. Ms. Roberts, are you on?
Yes, sir. Malinowski.
Here.
Thank
Dickerson.
Here.
McBride.
Here.
Livingston.
Here.
Teratio.
Here.
Walker. Kennedy. Manning.
Present.
Jackson. Myers.
Here.
Newton.
Here. Oops, here.
Let's see. And Mr. Chair, I did receive a phone call from Councilwoman Kennedy stating that she may not be able to make it to this meeting.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Jackson, you recognize?
yes, I just want to know for the record, I just logged in after my name was called. Just want to note the record I'm present.
Thank you. And let me welcome everyone, our guests as well as council members and staff. That brings our invocation and allegiance, the Honorable Shakese Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we have our invocation today, as we are in a time of unrest across the country, I think that I would be remiss if I didn't mention the name George Floyd and have us pause and have a minute of silence to recognize really the horrors that happened to him in Minneapolis. So I would ask that we have a minute of silence in his honor.
Thank you.
That was 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for our invocation today, I would like to share the words of the prayer of St. Francis, which I think that many of us know. We have many different religious traditions in Richland County, and I invite you to call upon yours as I call upon mine. But I think as we think about what we can do to make our society better, these words were applicable. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I have to stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That brings us to presentations. We have one presentation. Of course, this comes before the adoption of the agenda, but this item is an action item as well. We're required by statute to approve this budget. So I'm going to ask Mr. John Ando to give us a presentation with the understanding that when we get to the adoption of the agenda, we're going to have to add it for action. Mr. Ando?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the Richland County Council, thank you for having me this evening. In your packet, starting on page 7, is the Komets fiscal year 2020-2021 operations and capital budget. I also have with me Ms. Crystal Wills. She's our financial accountant, and she'll be able to help answer any technical financial details if there are any from the council. And I'll give you the brief highlights of this budget and be prepared to answer any questions that you may have. On page 8 is our letter to the board of directors of the Komet that talks about the intent of this operating and capital budget. And as we've done in previous years, in accordance with South Carolina Code of Laws, Chapter 25, Section 582570, as a regional transportation authority, we are supposed to present and get approval from all of the member agencies of the Regional Transportation Authority, that being the Komet. And we need to present this budget within 60 days prior to the beginning of the upcoming fiscal year. We have presented this budget to Lexington County. You're our next agency as Richland County. We've submitted it to the City of Columbia, and our last agency that will submit this to is the City of Forest Acres, which will be next Tuesday. This budget document is my second since coming to South Carolina in 2018. And we've done a lot of new initiatives to make the Komet a part of the community and make riding transit fun and attractive in the Central Midlands over the course of the last year. This upcoming fiscal year is our goal to focus on our current operations. However, one notable change is that we have a new operations contractor that will be assuming the operation of the Komet transit system effective July of 2020. That did increase our costs by 15%. And with that new contractor, we're going to have to evaluate our service delivery and make sure that we are delivering productive services in both of our service areas, Richland and Lexington County. And then coupled of the uncertainties of COVID-19, we've ensured that we took that into consideration in the preparation of this budget document. For the time being, we are assuming the operation of 175,000 vehicle hours for our fixed route service, 15,000 for our flexed route service that operates primarily in rural areas like Lower Richland and the Denny Terrace and Batesburg-Leesville areas, and 35,000 revenue hours for our DART 88 paratransit service. In order to prepare us for the upcoming fiscal year, which is 2021 to 2022, in light of potential decline in revenues, we are projecting that we need to reduce the transit system by 17,000 vehicle hours. Our service committee will be analyzing that and targeting services that are very unproductive and do not meet the board approved standards for those respective routes that we'll be looking at. So we suspect there'll be some evening service and weekend service that might face elimination. However, we do have a program with Lyft and Uber where we subsidize the first $5 of those person's trip at night, where we believe a lot of that low ridership could be shifted to that program without significantly impacting those in the evening hours. And that program is available until 3 a.m. every morning. And we get a lot of folks that take advantage of that to either to go to jobs that begin at night or to come home from jobs that end after the normal Komets system has ended for the night. We are infusing federal funding into this, into our operations for general operations as well as paratransit. We also received approximately 6.7 million of CARES Act funding that we're using in fiscal year 20, and another about 6.9 million of CARES Act funding that I'll be using in fiscal year 21 to supplant revenue losses from sales tax revenues being declined on the penny side, as well as fare revenues not coming to the realization that as we expected. So that's our one-time stopgap to cover any potential deficits. The proposed 17,000 service hour reduction will help us in ensuring that we have a balanced budget in fiscal year 21-22 by taking action in fiscal year 2021. We based our budget on known revenues based on existing grants that we have commitments for, or any other funding sources that we know that we always get on a formula basis to ensure that we have a balanced budget. We did ask, and Lexington County did concur for a 10% increase in their contribution for services that are provided in Lexington County per the board adopted service equity policy. And we also asked Newberry County, which my understanding is that has also been approved for contributions for service into Newberry County with the Route 93X. We are anticipating growing our staff by our staff will grow to 13 full-time employees from 11 full-time employees, plus 1 employee that is contracted with a social service agency. And then we're also proposing to add an additional 5.5 customer experience representatives to act as a customer service from the Comet. Previously, those 5.5 positions were provided by our contractor, and by transitioning those over to the Comet, we'll save approximately $78,000 by not paying profit and overhead on top of those positions, but we'll also be able to ensure proper customer service and a better customer experience for our riders by having direct control of those positions and being able to be more responsive in responding to customer concerns that are brought to the Comet's attention. We believe that this budget being presented will provide a stabilized footing for the Comet for fiscal year 2021 and prepare us for 21-22. So going into the actual details of the budget, page 15 has the proposed organizational chart that shows the positions that are directly under the direction of the executive director. The blue positions are positions that are full-time Comet employees. The green positions are positions that are contracted to third parties. And then the yellow is a position that we're asking for, but we're proposing to fill later on in the fiscal year, depending on how the revenue streams come in. And then the light blue is a temporary position that will be in place until we are able to install what is called automated passenger counters on our buses to be able to count the passengers to report to the federal government. And then once those are installed, that position will be eliminated from the organization. And pages 16 through 18 gives you a summary by department where those positions will be. Pages 19 and 20 gives you a summary of our accomplishments that we achieved in fiscal year 19-20, Some key highlights that we've done is that we've implemented Blue Bike in downtown Columbia. We've converted the fleet to biodiesel. We've continued our leadership academy to train people on how to understand the role of the Comet and how it operates. We enhanced transit services throughout Richland and Lexington counties with federal funding that we've received. We've added more flexible services, especially in the rural areas of Eastover, Gaston, and Hopkins. We've connected transit service for the first time in history to the Congaree National Park. We have created an express route that gets people to Amazon and Nephron for job opportunity and advancement. We've added frequency on routes that needed additional frequency due to growing demand. And then we launched Comet on the Go for people that need access to fresh food by using Lyft and Uber, or if they need transportation late at night when Comet buses are not running for a $5 subsidy. We've partnered with community organizations like Food Share. We have libraries on the buses in partnership with Richland Library so people can actually read while they're riding. We have contracts with the Columbia Police Department, Richland County Sheriff, and City of Casey Police Department to patrol our buses, bus stops, and facilities to ensure the safety of our employees and passengers. We held listening sessions throughout the service area to gather feedback from our customers to understand how we could be better. And we've implemented partnerships with Lexington Richland 5 for their students to ride the Comet unrestricted, Richland 1, Richland 2, Midlands Technical College, Columbia College, Allen University, and McIntyre Produce and Nephron Pharmaceuticals. And we've added this fiscal year alone 55 bus shelters throughout the service area. And our objective is to get 175 bus shelters within the next 3 to 5 years. So collectively with the shelters we just added, plus what we've had in the system, we're at 79 shelters throughout the service area. And we continue to pursue funding to help support that effort. Moving into the actual highlights, pages 24 of the board packet, council packet. On our capital projects, we anticipate adding a brand new intelligence transportation system that's funded through federal funds to replace our AVL system on our buses. Continue to finish the construction and finalize the payments of the 8 bike share stations in downtown Columbia. Continue to add more passenger amenities, including bus shelters and benches. Redesign our website. Implement our mobility management programs. Continue to train and develop staff. Continue to purchase computer hardware and software to support our operations. We've capitalized our planning efforts to get which means that we're only using 20% of our local funding to cover those costs. Upgrading our paratransit software to the latest version of what is called PASS. Replacement of the HVAC system at our operations and maintenance facility at Lucius Road. We're going to continue to fund the transit operations, marketing, and administration. Security at our buses, transit centers, and bus stops. The continuation of the van pool program, preventative maintenance of transit buses and facilities, continue the Lyft Uber subsidy, the Blue Bike program, implement a new volunteer transportation program, a new microtransit service in the Northeast Richland areas, as well as in Irmo. Consider a car share pilot with our grants that we received from the federal government, start a new healthcare access shuttle to take folks to pharmacies, healthcare appointments, and dental appointments. And then lastly, to implement a subsidized taxi program for seniors and persons with disabilities. One thing that's of note in this budget that's different is that we're also recommending that we do free rides for all passengers for this fiscal year only. Utilizing the care funds that we're receiving from the FTA, we believe that that can cover the deficit in the collection of fares. We have no idea how the COVID-19 issue is going to shake out in the upcoming fiscal year. We've seen a 47% ridership decline in the system, and we anticipate if we can provide a fare-free environment for 1 year, it can help with the socioeconomic issues of those that are out of work and are trying to find work and not having to worry about the cost of transportation. That's one. But two, also to rebuild ridership, and hopefully after we're able to move out of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we can get back to where we were pre-COVID, and then look at reinstitution affairs in fiscal year 21-22. In addition, we're getting a grant regardless if we have fare free or not from the Council of Governments, which will allow seniors and persons with disabilities age 60 and older, seniors age 60 and older, the ability to ride the Comet free of charge for 1 year. So that would cover the cost. One key highlights on the revenue side.
Ms.
Like
Andrew, about how much more time you have there?
2 more minutes.
Okay, thank
2
you.
more minutes. We are projecting a lower growth in the penny revenues that we receive due to declines in sales. The CARES Act funding will cover our deficits due to lack of sales revenues. We increased our contributions from external agencies like Lexington County and Newberry County. We have private partners that continue to fund the transit system. And then, as I mentioned, our transit operational costs are anticipated to increase by 15%. And that we're going to be studying our route network and making some recommendations to fine tune the system. And then that we're going to also include operational costs for piloting 2 hydrogen buses. That's really a summary of the operations and capital budget of the Comet, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Let me ask my colleagues at this time, do they have any specific questions? Ms. Malinowski, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right.
Mr. Ando, you indicated that Newberry County revenue may be realized for your 93X route in the amount of $2,500. Are you, I mean, I'm only going by what's written here. It says it may be realized. Is this something you're not sure of yet?
At the time of writing, we weren't sure of. It was in the second reading of the Newberry County Council. My understanding is that it has been approved and will be provided to the Comet starting July 1.
Okay, and do you know what the cost to run that route will be annually?
I do. I can give me 1 second. I'll give you that exact number.
I just need ballpark.
$93X will cost the Comet $90,819 to operate. Federal funds will cover 50% of that. Fare revenue will cover 15% of that, which leaves the local share of $22,704 that needs to be covered.
Okay, thank you. Also, you indicated University of South Carolina revenue was unknown for funding 5 trips on another route, and the agreement expired in September of 2019. Is there any reason that we don't know what the revenue was from those trips on that route?
Yes, we're in discussions with the university right now to if they want to continue those 5 trips or not. And I'm waiting for a response from the chief operating officer of the university. We have told them that we need a resolution of this by June 30, or we're going to cancel those 5 trips since there's no revenue stream to cover for those.
Oh, okay.
They did commit to reimbursing us though at the minimum from September to June,
Okay,
regardless.
That's what my question was. I probably asked it wrong. The other question I have was related to on page 44 of our agenda related to your security, and where you've got in there, it indicates that you've contracted security, and I'm guessing that's a private security firm in there, but you're also using Richland County Sheriff, Columbia Police, and other law enforcement agencies. Is that correct? You do have a private?
That is correct.
Well, is there any reason why the private security firm isn't utilized 100%? Because I noticed their hourly rate is lower than all the other law enforcement agencies, which could save you thousands of dollars a year.
So the reason why we have this hybrid approach is the policing and entities have the ability to arrest and cite, whereas the contracted security does not. So we use the contracted security primarily at Komets Central, which is Laurel and Sumter, to control the crowds that are there during peak travel times and to protect our facilities. And then we use the law enforcement to ride buses and provide additional support when the security is not able to handle the situation. We do have federal funds that cover some of the costs of the security and the policing services.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ando. I'm done.
Thank you. I have Ms. McBride and Ms. Newton.
Mr. Standoff, I just really want to thank you for providing an excellent and very informative report that was easy to follow. And I want to thank you for your innovation and the progress that we've made in Richland County with the transit system.
Thank you, Ms. McBride.
Thank you, Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Ando, I would also like to echo Ms. McBride's comments as well. Thank you for all that you've done for the comment. Quick question. You mentioned that the new provider that's replacing TransDev is your costs are going to increase around 15%. Is that what you were anticipating, given that after several years you bid out the contract and prices go up, or was there some other change that precipitated that increase in cost?
No, we were anticipating that we would have a 15% increase in cost just because of the cost of doing business is significantly higher today than it was back in 2015. So we prepared ourselves when we went out to bid that this would be coming.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank
Mr.
Anyone
Chair.
else?
Yeah,
Ms. Myers?
Mr. Chair, this is Celia. Yes.
Ms. Myers, you
Mr.
recognize?
Ando, thank you, sir. Mr. Ando, like Ms. McBride, I enjoyed reading your report. It was clear, it was detailed enough so that we could follow and understand. And thank you for highlighting the sources of funds and making the federal contribution clear so that we could understand what the penny's doing and what the federal funds are doing, what the COG is doing, what the local governments are doing. And I'd also like to thank you because I've heard from constituents that the Comet is much more responsive to their needs. The routes have improved dramatically, and the bus to the Congaree Park could not be more welcome. So I wanted to publicly thank you and to say I hope you stay in Richland County the rest of your career. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Andrew, you might want to end on that note, huh?
Yes.
Any other questions? If not, let me also, Ms. Andrew, share my appreciation for what you've done with this system, and certainly we'll continue to support you as best we can to make sure it continues.
Much appreciated. And thank
There's
you.
no final questions. That'll move us to our next item. And as I mentioned, we'll have to take action on this item, but we'll move that to the agenda once we adopt the agenda. So the next item before us is the approval of minutes. Chair, entertain a motion for approval of minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It's a moving properly second. Any changes, deletions, et cetera? Staff, you have anything different? I do have a couple of things. One of them is I'd like to move the comment to an action item. We can put that, we can make that the first item on the agenda.
Mr. Chair, we're doing the approval of the minutes, not the agenda.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying to get you through this, man. Ms. Roberts, can you call, do you have anything on the agenda? Not, Ms. Roberts, can you call Ruble for adoption of the agenda to move in second?
No, approval of minutes.
Minutes. It's moved in second for the minutes.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy, Manning,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Malinowski, for not letting me run through too fast. Now that brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Again, I'd like to add the comment as an action item after the adoption of the agenda. So we'll make that 6A if that's passed. Also, the transportation item need to be added to the agenda. You got I think you got a separate corresponding reference to transportation item I was talking about adding. And so we want to add that item also. Do staff, anyone else, anything need to be added to the agenda? And we'll put the transportation item after the report of the Rules and Appointments Committee. We'll make that a 17.
Move to approve the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Motion approved, the agenda as amended with
Second.
items for transportation and the comment. Is there a second? It's moved and properly second for adoption of the agenda as amended. Ms. Roberts, call roll.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy, Manning,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Passes.
Thank you. That brings us to the comment, the chair entertain a motion for adoption of the comment budget as presented.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
It's
I'll
moved.
second, Mr. Chair.
Moved and properly second. Any further discussion? There being none, Ms. Robinson, call roll.
Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you. And before we move off the comment, let me also recognize Ms. Dickerson for her many, many years and her valuable role in helping Ms. Ando achieve all those wonderful things.
Oh, it's a chore, but I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item 7. Attorney for executive session.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of council, Brad Farah from legal. I have no items under the attorney's report. However, I do note item 10B under the administrator's report is a personnel matter, and that would be appropriate for discussion in executive session if council so chooses. I do not believe we have any outside counsel for that item. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item 8, citizens input. Ms. Roberts, do we have any citizen input for the items on the agenda not requiring a public hearing? 8A.
No, sir.
That moves us to item 9, citizen input must pertain to Richland County matters not on the agenda. Ms. Roberts,
Yes, sir. I have one submission.
can you share that for the record?
Yes, sir. Yes. It comes from Cheryl Outlaw. Hello, my name is Cheryl Lever Outlaw, and I reside in District 1. I am asking for help not only for my own family, but for all families in a single-family residential zone. I am asking for your help to help us feel safe again in the neighborhoods located along the main road of Johnson Marina Road. I am asking that zoning ordinances be put in place to end and stop Airbnbs in our residential neighborhoods. We as residents have the right to neighborhoods to feel comfortable and safe to raise our families and to be outdoors with the comfort of knowing the people in our neighborhood instead of having transient nightly, weekly, or weekend renters who come and go creating havoc and being nuisances. With an Airbnb, how can you know who is in the house next to you? During the lockdown due to COVID-19, I personally had 3 nights of guests next to me who were from New York, New Jersey, and Georgia. 2 states were supposed to be prevented from coming into our state. However, the people from Georgia rented the house and the people from New York and New Jersey were friends of theirs. The owner of the home was totally oblivious of this as he accepted the request through Airbnb and was told it was guests only from Georgia. People are totally dishonest of who they are, where they are from, and their intent. If I don't know if I have a visiting murderer, pedophile, or recently released felon next door. Visit the Airbnb website. Anyone can rent the Airbnb home next to you. How are we to be safe? Numerous problems have arisen from Airbnb rentals. Too many to list, but for the Airbnb next to me personally, they include drunken and disorderly conduct, public nudity, profane language, extreme parties night and day, loud, obnoxious, explicit music played outside via voice speaker day and night, litter and garbage in neighbors' yards and along roads. These renters do nothing to contribute to our neighborhoods, and they upset the peaceful enjoyment of longstanding residential neighborhoods. These transient renters have no stake in the community and therefore no reason to care how the neighborhood around them suffers from their activities. That would be the 2-minute timer, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you very much. Any other? Robert, that you said that was the
Yes, sir, that was it.
Thank you. That brings item 10, report of the county administrator, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir. Under this report, I'm going to give you a brief update following the coronavirus ad hoc committee meeting on today. I'll also give you a quick update on the most recent numbers related to COVID-19 positive cases in Richland County. And then I'll conclude the report. So right now, as it stands, the last report from SCDHEC's website communicates that Richland County stands at 1,542 positive cases of COVID-19 within Richland County. Right now, we have seen a small uptick in positive cases, which is consistent with the information that was shared with us by both DHEC as well as our partners at Prisma. In conversations related to Richland County's plans for opening, there have been renewed discussions with members of the committee as well as members of the staff. Staff has a general working draft for the body, but also individually departments have begun to make applicable plans for their individual departments. The next step is also to meet with elected officials within the county to determine what specific outfits they may need in order to provide the ability for workers whenever they return to the county to return to a safe environment that is consistent with the CDC and DHEC guidelines. As a result of the coronavirus ad hoc committee meeting on today, the committee charged me with going back to consider a larger scope of work to include recommendations to be made to other organizations that reside within Richland County, general COVID-19 related guidance from Richland County. So that is something I will be doing as well, and hope to have that information provided within the week. So right now, Mr. Chair, I'll certainly open up for questions related to coronavirus response by Richland County, but that is my report at this time. The relief grant information is another item, so I don't know if we should discuss that right now because that's an action.
Yeah,
item.
we'll cover that when it's on the agenda because I think it's going to require action.
Correct.
Any questions about the update? I have Mr. Malinowski and Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administrator Brown, and I don't know that this is on an action, part of the action item, but it said the advisory committee concurred with the fact that the county not sign an agreement with DHEC relating to a non-congregate sheltering program. Is that something we're going to have to be voting on?
No, sir, that item has really been taken care of. The DHEC has worked closely with Richland County and Richland County has worked closely with DHEC. There has been non-congregate sheltering that has taken place. It did not ultimately require a contract to be signed. We have not had a large number of individuals in non-congregate sheltering, so it has been handled between DHEC as well as our emergency management division. So at this point in time, sir, there is no need to sign that agreement. We're still working together without that agreement.
Okay, how about the fact that it said DHEC was attempting to pass on to counties within the state without any assurances of funding support? So it would become, while they're saying an underfunded mandate, I think it really is an unfunded mandate. Are there monies we're having to hand over to them for this?
So again, at this time, DHEC has worked with us. We have not had to pay any funding. Earlier on in the process with COVID-19 response, many counties had questions of the state and felt as though it was the state's responsibility to manage that particular portion of the response because they felt it was a medical issue and not a emergency response issue. But that's kind of been worked out county by county. And so, Mr. Malinowski, right now, there are no conflicts that we have with DHEC. I've worked with Mr. Thorpe. Mr. Thorpe and his team have worked with our emergency management department. And so again, right now, there are no conflicts with our application and taking care of non-congregate sheltering between Richland County and DHEC.
Okay, now I've got two more things to ask, and I don't need answers now. I just like the information provided on page 87, our agenda. It said, see attached list of current COVID-19 identified resources. I did not see those. If I missed them, just let me know via an email. That will be fine. And the last one was, while we've hired this group, I'm not sure that I ever recall seeing any type of dollar amounts that we're paying them, and whatever that dollar amount is, are we getting a lot of that or any of that covered via federal money or state money or where? And you can give me those answers later. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. I have Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown, have you begun the discussion? And if so, are you able to share with council where you are in that discussion regarding the return to work for county employees?
Yes, sir, Mr. Jackson. We had a conversation this afternoon with the coronavirus ad hoc committee. And as a part of that conversation, I did communicate that in my discussions with Prisma, Dr. Osmond in particular, their chief of preparedness, that he had reviewed our working draft and had determined that based on that working draft, we were somewhere in between what we would call our phase 1 and phase 2, sir. During those discussions as well, it was noted that Dr. Osmond had given me feedback and communicated that when COVID-19 was the first thought about in terms of the curve that we all heard about, that the projections were there will be a steep curve and then a steep decline. And that those projections are what led to the guidance that said, looking at a 14-day decline, then you would be able to utilize that as a criteria by which to determine how you should begin to, you could use that as a reopening consideration. Since then, we have not seen, and according to the Dr. Osmond, that the data does not show a decline, a steep decline. It shows a flattening and a leveling out. And so in my discussions with the COVID committee, I communicated that I was concerned that if we use just that single criteria as a 14-day decline, that we may run into some issues with when we may be able to reopen. So the long and short of that is that we were tasked with going back to look at some additional criteria that we could utilize. Then I would come back and make a recommendation to this group about when we would be opening and based on what criteria. So Mr. Jackson, that's where we are today, sir, based on that meeting with the committee.
So does that mean that there are no offices being staffed by any county employees other than when we have events like tonight during the normal course of the business day from 8 to 5?
Yes, sir, we've always had employees staffed in the offices throughout this entire process. The volume of employees is what's been different. So the offices are probably about if I had to give a number, 25 to 30% staffed with individuals in the offices. And then other folks are working remotely, and you have people who are moving around the county at all times.
Right.
So that's kind of the staffing level that we are right now, Mr. Jackson.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And the reason I'm asking that question is I think that there is some misperception in the public regarding the fact that we are closed versus open. And I was aware that there are some staff members because I've seen people going in the building to pay their property tax. So I knew that didn't try to make that a leading question. I just wanted you to answer it for the record and for anyone who's watching this tonight, that people would be aware that the county really is open in a very staggered sense, but that there are actual employees in the buildings, in offices, doing work on behalf of the public. And I don't know if that's something the PIO might need to consider putting back out to the public, because I've heard on more than one occasion people under the impression that the county is closed, and the question has been, when is the county office is going to reopen? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Myers, you recognize?
Yes, sir. So this is Delia Myers. I want to go back to Mr. Malinowski's topic area, the non-congregate shelter options and the DHEC agreement. In the briefing documents, they stated that the COVID-19 Advisory Committee concurred with the recommendation that the county not sign the DHEC agreement and agreed with our outside consultant that we should go a different direction. Is that the COVID-19 Advisory Committee that also is vetting our applications for grants?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
What committee is that?
Those were separate issues, Councilmember Myers.
What committee is that?
That was addressed quite some time ago, earlier on, when we received that application from DHEC.
But is that the staff committee, or what advisory committee are you referring to?
Yeah, so I think what we're talking about is, we're talking about when we say committees, I think there are multiple COVID committees. We have COVID committees that are working with our Tetra Tech provider, that provider. You have our COVID committee, but I think that's what that's talking about. That's not talking about the grant related committee.
I understand. Because it made the policy decision that we should not sign an agreement with DHEC, I'm trying to find out who they are.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we made a policy decision. That decision was also communicated with legal as well, because there were consistent questions about the concerns of the state at that time, making a financial obligation to the county, by which the county would then be required to perform these services, which in general, counties across the state had thought that the state would be doing. So
I get that, Mr. Brown. I'm just asking who the people are who have made a decision that could potentially impact whether or not Richland County is in that agreement with DHEC, because I wasn't aware of it before reading it in these documents. I just want to know who made the decision. That's all.
Okay, well, I can't answer that question right now, but Ms. Myers, I brought this up in a previous committee meeting as well. And so I don't recall, and the situation was the agreement itself was funding that the county would receive on a small level. So it wasn't anything that at least at the time we talked about.
Let me say, I agree with the decision.
Okay.
I'm not questioning the decision. I am questioning the composition of the committee with the power to make a policy decision. I don't think there are any council members on that committee, and I don't think that committee ultimately comes back to council before making such decisions. So I just like the public to know who's on the committee. That's all.
And Mr. Brown, can you just make sure you just get that and shoot and send that to council members?
Yes, sir, I can. I'm sorry. I was just.
I think that is important.
Yeah, because I don't think, maybe I'm misunderstanding a little bit, so I'll move on, Mr. Chair. I think it's a reasonable question, but I guess what I was hearing is that the committee made a decision, and maybe that's the way the wording was put in there, versus that the committee made a recommendation and that the agreement wasn't signed. But I'll get whoever those groups are just to get that cleared up. So thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and just so Mr. Brown, it's not a criticism. It's just that this is such a new area for everybody that the public and obviously this body really do want to know who is making these really important, serious decisions. That's all. It's not a criticism. It's just for information.
Thank you. You finished, Ms. Myers?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Malinowski, then Ms. McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Myers, that's where I was going to return to find that out, because on page 86 of our agenda, it also states that the committee decided unanimously not to do some things. And this Mr. Beekman from, I guess, the Tetra Tech group said he made a motion to modify certain procedures, and that motion was also accepted. And further down under the recovery plan on the bullet point, it says Tetra Tech has spoken with various members of county staff regarding their thoughts on a COVID-19 specific recovery plan. Yet nothing, as you're saying, has come to the council for any input. And so that's why I'm wondering, unlike when we had the Blue Ribbon Committee and Mr. Pierce was in charge of that, everything came back to council for final decision making, but I haven't seen anything come back to council right now. Yet I'm reading in here that decisions have been made. So I also would like to know who's making those decisions. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Chair and Mr. Malinowski. So what I'm hearing now is, and I want to make sure, and I will come back to you with that information. I'm a little bit confused, only because I know some of the discussions that we had, we talked about making decisions at the administrative level, which I've been bringing everything back to you all as a part to being able to respond and react to COVID-19. And that's why I've been bringing things to the committee to try to get input and feedback as a part of that process. And so it sounds to me like if there are decisions that I am making, then those really do need to come back before those decisions are made before the body, so that there can be clarity on what those decisions are before I actually take that action.
I don't think there is, if you've been given the authority by the council, but I don't know about the committee making the decision versus you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I have Ms. McBride and then Mr. Manning.
I think Ms. Myers and Mr. Malinowski expressed some of my concerns. But for clarification, that committee does not provide information to the council Corona Advisory Committee. So we're left out a lot of times in terms of what's going on with that committee. So there is a gap in communications with that committee, whoever that committee is. And that's what I was wondering. And I think I raised that issue at the Coronavirus Committee this morning, but perhaps it wasn't understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I might be a little unclear, and this is a question for Administrator Brown. Are these committees of your staff? Like, is this all under you? And somehow the way this reporting is coming to council within the council agenda, making it sound like there are committees, council committees or community committees, or are these all under you as the administrator, groups that are called committees who are doing work on your behest, and then that work ultimately would be from you to the council?
That's correct, Mr. Manning.
Okay, well, in that case, then I think that somehow It's more of how it's getting into the council agenda and looking like it's council business, council work, council groups and committees. But it sounds to me like this is exactly the way the county administrator ought to be doing his work, and then ultimately bringing to our ad hoc committee the information, and ad hoc committee to council. That's just one person's thought. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Myers, you recognize.
I'm a little confused now. Can I just ask a follow-up question of the administrator, please?
Yes, please.
Mr. Brown, it looks like from the section on pages 83 to about 89 that what's being discussed is some committee that is comprised of not staff, as Mr. Manning suggested, which I thought would have been a really good sort of conclusion to all of this, but recommendations coming through our external advisors to a group comprised of I don't know, it doesn't seem to me that it's just staff. So I would like some clarity. I'll go back to my original question on who is on these committees, because it seems like, as Mr. Malinowski correctly pointed out, from the writing only, now that maybe that the text is not clear, but from the writing, it does seem as if there are votes being taken on pretty significant decisions related to our coronavirus response. I would not have wanted to vote any differently on the DHEC matter, for example, but certainly whether or not we enter into an agreement with other counties and DHEC ought to be something that I think at least one council person somewhere ought to weigh in on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, any more reference your update with coronavirus?
Mr. Chair, no, sir, and I will get that information to better explain to everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Another question, we'll move on to item 10B. Well, that's a personnel matter, so.
That's an executive session, Mr. Chair.
If council chooses. That brings item 11. We'll take up personnel matter executive session at the end. Item 11, report of the clerk of council.
Mr. Chair, there is no report from this office at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, the report of the chair. There's no report at this time. That brings item 13, open and closed public hearings. 13A, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020 general fund annual budget by $455,259 to pay for in-car camera system for the Richland County Sheriff Department. Did anyone sign up to speak? That public hearing is now open. Did anyone sign up to speak to that public hearing?
No, sir, Mr. Chair.
That public hearing is now closed. That brings to item 13B, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020 general fund annual budget by $670,600 to pay for repairs and improvements at the central garage facility. That public hearing is now open. Did anyone sign up to speak?
No, sir, Mr. Chair.
That public hearing is now closed. That brings to item 14, approval of consent items. Item 14A, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020 general fund budget for $455,259 to pay for in-car camera system for Richland County Sheriff Department. Item 14B, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020 general fund budget by $670,600 to pay for repairs and improvements at the central garage facility. That's the third reading item. Item C, Harris Government Master License and Service Agreement for the new CMA system. And item 14D, Federal Aviation Administration FAA CARES Grant Acceptance.
Chairman, I move for approval of all the consent items in that section.
Is a motion for approval of the said items A, B, C, D, A, B, C, and D?
Second.
Second.
Is moving in proper second. I read those all for the public. Any discussion reference to motion for approval of items A, B, C, and D, 14? There being none, Ms. Roberts, I'll ask you to call the roll for the motion for the consent items.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton. It passes.
Thank you very much. That brings to item 15 on the agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Items, item 15A.
Mr. Chair, I
First,
apologize.
what was that?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I apologize. Is it possible we could clinch those items, sir?
Which ones, Ms. Brown?
I believe it's four items, A through D.
Those consent items?
Mr.
Correct.
Chairman, I move for reconsideration.
Motion for reconsideration for the consent
Second.
items 14A through D. It's properly second.
Second.
It's moving properly second. There'll be no questions. Ms. Roberts, can you call the roll?
Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson,
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
No.
Horatio,
No.
Walker, Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
No.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
No.
It fails.
Thank you. Now that brings item 15, second reading items, 15A, approving the transfer of certain property located in Blythewood Business Park to Fairfield Electric Corporation and other related matters.
Mr. Chair,
Brown,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Deputy,
Mr. Chair, I move to approve this item.
motion for approval is a second.
Second.
It's moving properly second. Any discussion reference item 15A, and Ms. Malinas, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the item. However, in the minutes we previously approved at the start of the meeting, there was one item that the council asked be put in this particular agreement, and it's not in here. And that was that if at any time in the future, the property is no longer used for the purpose of transfer, it reverts back to Richland County and must be returned in the same condition as when provided by Richland County. So that needs to be put in there based on unanimous approval by the council at the last meeting. And I'd just like to also point out that in section 2, once again, it's not the first time, there are 2 lines that have been added in here that weren't in the original agreement. And not highlighted, underlined, bolded, or anything. They're just in there as if they're trying to be snuck in there. I don't see any problem with them, but I still think council needs to be made aware of these changes. So I would like to make a friendly amendment to the motion and the second that particular language regarding the return of the property be put somewhere in this particular agreement.
Mr. Malinowski, as the maker of that motion, I would accept that. Let me say to you, Mr. Ruble's on the line, and he and I had a specific conversation about that this morning, which you just raised, because I remember you raising it before, and I want him to address the fact that if it's not in there, why not? Because he indicated to me that it would be in there tonight. So, Mr. Ruble, if you'll respond to that, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, sir. This is Jeff Ruble, Director of Economic Development. I know some of this. I know some of the details. Ms. Harrison's also on this call, and she's been having conversations with Emily Luther at Parker Poe and the real estate attorney handling this transaction. And I think she can speak to it a little more clearly.
Hi, good evening, members of council. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, hi, Tiffany Harrison. So yes, Mr. Malinowski, the changes that you referenced in section 2 were the attempt after we worked with legal counsel to address the concern about the property being used for the intended purpose, which was the construction of a substation, infrastructure to support the substation, and then the remaining space to remain as green space as shown in the master plan. So that specific sentence there, and the two specific sentences that you refer to, requires that Fairfield Electric actually begin construction of the substation within 12 months. And then it also gives us the authority to memorialize that in an agreement with Fairfield Electric. And that was that second edition that you're referring to, sir.
Mr. Chair, what I would like to ask, though, is to accept Mr. Malinowski's specific request to amend it to also add the language that says that if it doesn't go as planned, that the property will revert back to the county, is what he's specifically asking for. Is that correct, Mr. Malinowski?
That's correct, Mr. Jackson. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I will accept that, Mr. Chair, as an amendment to the second reading, and that it will be in there by the time it gets to third reading.
Okay, you heard the motion with the amendment. Any further discussion?
Did the person that seconded approve it?
Was that Mr. I don't recall who said it. I'm sorry, Mr. Manning.
Mr. Manning.
Yes, sir, it was me. Yeah, and I kind of like the caveat that if it's not in there next time, that rather than it stand for third reading, it go back to the committee and start all over again.
Any further discussion?
Well, I'm just saying, you know, I've served with Mr. Malinowski for 11 plus years. And I'm not going to be serving any longer, but in 11 plus years, I kid you not, I don't think I've ever been in a council meeting where he doesn't bring up something that was promised that would be at the next meeting, and it isn't. So I think it's time that we start doing something a little bit differently when this happens meeting after meeting after meeting for over a decade. Thank you for letting me have my opinion.
Mr. Chair, if you could recognize us, please.
Wait a minute. Who's trying to be recognized?
Mr. Ruble,
Mr.
Harrison.
Go ahead, please.
I think there's a misunderstanding. We have addressed this. I think legal counsel didn't want to address it within the ordinance. Tiffany, can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So when we took this back and we discussed the request, which, and maybe there was a little bit of a misunderstanding on my part, specifically what that request was. I was under Mr. Malinowski the understanding that it was that we wanted to ensure that the property was used for the intended purpose. That was the information that I relayed back to Ms. Luther that we talked about. And there were two ways to be able to address that. One was to do what we've done here within this language and this ordinance, giving us the authority to have Fairfield Electric agree to move forward with the construction of the substation, which was the intended purpose for us to transfer the property, and have them do so within a certain amount of time. We would then go back and we would do this after, you know, we would do this via a contract with Fairfield Electric after the ordinance was passed. The second option, which is absolutely an option should council choose that, would be to put a deed restriction on, and we would actually record that when the deed is recorded. That would require additional action at some point by both parties, though. It would have to be when has it been determined that they have met the requirements of the agreement with them. And at that point in time, then we would have to go back and take formal action to be able to undo whatever that deed restriction was. That was why this was approached the way that it was. I believe we reached out, we wanted to have some conversations about, is this appropriate? Is this the direction that we were supposed to go?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Malinowski.
Ms. Harrison, I'm going to direct you and Mr. Ruble to page 76 of our agenda, where it has the minutes from the last meeting. And in no uncertain terms, third paragraph up from the bottom, it states specifically what was being asked to be placed in here. And at the very top of page 77 is the actual vote on that matter. So it's a simple, straightforward request.
Absolutely.
And it seems that I'm hearing all kinds of other jump through the hoops things that have nothing to do with the request. I understand you've put in there that they have so many months to begin construction and that they have to use it for the intended purpose. But at no point in time was it mentioned about deed restrictions and going back and forth. What the council said that they wanted, it's all spelled out right here. And if you put it in this agreement, it's done. We don't need to jump through other hoops, get other restrictions, get them recorded, get them unrecorded in the future. I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill here. It seems pretty cut and dry to me if you just look at the last minutes and again at the minutes from this meeting to see what was requested, and Mr. Jackson also going along and pointing that out to you. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Hold on, Mr. Jackson, go ahead.
We have a friendly amendment from Mr. Malinowski. I've accepted it. I don't know whether Mr. Mann is going to second. If he doesn't want to, that's fine. If he will, then we'll move on. If he doesn't, we'll have to get
Mr.
another
Jackson,
second.
I second it. I was second it for this, keep it going.
But I already did, and I
Yes.
still
I
am.
just want to know
I have
if
a
you-
motion and a second. Mr. Jackson, go ahead.
I'm just going to say that I've given Mr. Malinowski my word that by third reading, I will be the one to pull it if it's not in there.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
will recommend it not go forward if it's not in there.
Okay, I think I know where we are now in terms of the motion. Any further discussion? If not, Ms. Roberts, can you call a roll?
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride, Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio.
McBride, yes.
Thank you, Ms. McBride. Teratio. Ms. Teratio, you're muted, so I'm not quite sure if you're speaking or not. Walker, Kennedy, Manning,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 15B, and authorizing temporary waiver of late fees or penalties on the payment of hospitality tax, tourism, development fees, and business license fees. Is entertain a motion.
Move to approve. Move to approve.
Motion for approval is a second.
Second.
It's moving properly second. Discussion. There being no discussion, Ms. Roberts, we call the roll for the vote on.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Item 16, report of the Administration and Finance Committee. The Honorable Joyce Dickerson.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair. The report of the Administration and Finance Committee, we have two items, item 16A and B. First one is 16A, clarification sewer water connection. This was forwarded to council without a recommendation. The explanation for this is on page 147 through 151. And like I said, it was sent to council without a recommendation. It was a vote of 2-1. Thank you.
Thank you. You've heard the report from the committee reference item 16A. This was not a recommendation. Let me see if staff have anything to report reference items, just in case some committee members.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do have.
Mr. Chair, can I get clarification before staff weighs in here?
Go ahead, you recognize.
Thank you. I'm not truly sure this is properly before. It says Ms. Dickerson said it came out of committee to the council without a recommendation. But on May 5th, the item was sent back to the A&F committee. And it was not on the May 21st A&F committee agenda. So it was never vetted by the committee up until this point in time. And in addition, the information that was in the committee briefing on the recommended action from the April 28th meeting date is 100% different from the information that's in this agenda that we have in front of us.
I totally agree, Mr. Malinowski.
Excuse me?
I said, I totally agree with your explanation.
So I don't even know I know what we're asking to be voted on here on a recommended action, but there's two recommended actions, one approve it, one don't. Yet on the recommended action from the April 28th committee, there were about there were about 6 different recommended actions in there. So we don't even have consistency on the recommended actions. And I believe it needs to get back to the committee to figure out exactly what's going on and what is the recommended action. So I was
not just Ms. Malinowski, Ms. Dixon, was this not on the last A&F committee agenda?
No.
This item came out of.
Is that what you're saying, Ms. Malinowski?
No, it was not on the last one, which was May 21st was the last day. And it came out of committee, was supposed to go back somewhere along the line. I'm guessing it just did not get put on that May 21st agenda.
But the motion was to refer back to the agenda, back to the committee?
Yes, sir. That was at the May 5th council meeting.
Were you about to say something, Ms. Dickerson?
I was just going to say on May 5th, we did defer this item to go back to I believe it was to go back. This item was discussed in previous A&F committees and it was sent to council because we could not get it did not pass. So we could not have a recommendation to council. So we would send it without a recommendation. I would entertain some staff for them to assist us with this item because I believe we've had 2 different recommendations on this item. But I can go to the one that I had in the package.
I'm just trying to determine whether it's proper for us, and that is, it was on the May 5th agenda. About to say something, Ms. Dickerson? On the May 5th council agenda or?
Council agenda.
Oh, it was on the May 5th council agenda and there was action on it.
So the action was to send it back to the A&F committee.
And the action was sent back to the A&F committee and it have not been back to an A&F committee yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Dickerson, you recognize?
This item has been a lot of controversy back and forth. I don't have the A&F committee's agenda in front of me at this particular point in time, but I would ask that if one of staff would have that agenda so that I can refer to it really briefly. I did not really see that. So does staff have a copy of the A&F agenda for me right now? I don't have it in front of me. I apologize. It's stuffed in paper in this little square.
I have.
The last A&F committee meeting.
Well, I have it in front of me, A through G, and this item's not on it.
Well, Mr. Chair, since we are not able to come to a conclusion on this, I would ask that we defer this item and make sure that it's on the A&F committee for the next A&F committee meeting. And that would be my motion to rescind it, to make sure that if it wasn't on there, that it is on there for discussion, because we ran out of time on a couple of things. And I think that might've been an item that was supposed to be, but we ran out of time. So I would refer this item back to our next A&F committee. That would be my motion.
You heard the motion, is there a second?
I'll second it and make sure it's put as number 1.
Council. That's exactly right. And I want this item put number 1 because basically what has happened in the past, we've had items that should have been number one that's becoming last on the agenda and not being able to, we run out of time and don't really have a lot of time to discuss it. So I would like for this item to be number one, staff on the next A&F committee's agenda. Thank you. That's my motion. Mr. Malinowski, second.
Yes,
It's been moved in second. Ms. Myers, did you want to recognize?
Yes, sir, Chairman Livingston. Ms. Myers.
Did want to be recognized. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought I saw your name pop up just now. Ms. Myers, go ahead.
Just two things that I'll say to this. This item, when the staff brings it back to A&F, I just wanted to be clear that this is a commitment that Richland County made to citizens. And so to the extent that we are now, I'm kind of surprised that it's back for a vote. This was a promise that we made that these taps would be free, that the county would provide them and we would do the work. So I'm a little bit surprised that this is even an item that we're dealing with, but I'd just like to remind the staff that at least 2 council members and 3 administrators and many of you as staff members and our consultant have all been in community meetings where we have unequivocally stated that this would not be a cost to the community. And so I'd like to be real sure that what we're doing is consistent with the way this project was designed and the promises that we made. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Chairman Livingston.
Mr. Brown, you recognize.
I actually also had Mr. Shear Myers, who was trying to be recognized to communicate our understanding of the deferral and where the action was deferred to, which may be dealing with some of the confusion.
All right, go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of council. Prior to the minutes being posted for the last meeting, it was our understanding that the item was actually deferred to the next council meeting. And so because we did not have the information ready for the next council meeting in May, we pushed it to the June meeting. In fact, our notes indicate that it was deferred to the next meeting. A&F was not specified. If it was to be A&F, I will be glad to accept that error, as it was my notes that indicated it was the next meeting. But that is why it's back before you tonight.
I would, without further ado on this, Miss Myers, I would like for us to proceed with the vote so we can move forward with this and make sure we get this item cleared and with a lot of clarity before it come back before us right now. If it has to be discussed again in the A&F committee, then that was my motion. I think that's what Mr. Malinowski voted on. And I'd like for us to move forward and we just get all the information and make sure that we have the proper information and documentations to back this up when we come back.
All right, the motion moved and properly second. I'm asking Ms. Roberts to call the roll.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
No.
Manning is no.
Yes, sir. Newton,
No.
it passes.
Thank you.
Miss,
Next
ahead,
item will be, pardon me, Mr. Chair,
go ahead. You can continue with your report.
Your next item will be item 16B, a replacement of office building sewer management division. That explanation for this item is on page 152 through 170. And this was an item that was on our agenda, but the time expired and we asked for 3 more minutes so that we could get a motion to send this to the full council without a recommendation.
Okay.
And I would ask staff to help us with an explanation for this particular item.
All right. Staff,
Yes, sir. This is John Thompson here. So for this particular item, staff is requesting the replacement of the office building. The current issue with the office building that they have now is inadequate space, for one. For two, they have a leaky roof. The door is leaking as well. So once they have a rainfall, We're having issues with the doors, with the windows. They have a failing water heater system there. There's an unstable floor. And so at this point, they have money budgeted for it. And so we're asking for the council's permission to move forward so that the stormwater team could move forward in getting a new building.
Thank you. You heard staff recommendation. Turn to the motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve.
Motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Moving properly second. Discussion, Mr. Malinowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I would like to know is with all the buildings that Richland County has purchased, do we not have something that would be able to accommodate this particular department division?
Mr. Malinowski, individuals would have to be co-located to another location, but currently they're located on the same Powell Road campus with the Director of Public Works, and so that team is there intact. And so definitely we could look into them going to another location, but they've been there and working in sync with other staff members in Public Works.
Okay, so it's to our benefit to keep them there with those other groups.
Absolutely.
Okay, and just for the record and clarification, on page 152, where it says May 21st, the A&F committee forwarded this to council without a recommendation, that is not correct. This item was on the April 28th A&F agenda and forwarded without a recommendation due to running out of time, as Ms. Dickerson has stated. Unless there was a revised agenda for May 21st, I don't know why it wasn't on that one, but that's the actual time frames. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
It's a moving proper second. Ms. McBride, you recognize?
Yes, from both issues and many, many more issues, and Mr. Malinowski can attest to this. I have been asking for a track and document of motions. We go through this time and time again because we aren't able to track our emotions and the status that they're in. We need to develop a track and document. And I don't know who can do it. It shouldn't be that difficult, but this request has been going on for at least 3 years. And every year, several times a year, we lose motions in the dark hole, or we are confronted with not knowing what was done. So again, I'm asking for your leadership in helping us to develop a track and document.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask Ms. Roberts to call the roll for item 16B.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker, Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. That brings us to the report of,
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, I missed, who that needs to be recognized? Ms. Newton, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I move to reconsider.
I'm seconding that because
The
that's.
motion is for reconsideration for item 16B. It was properly second. Any discussion? There being none, did you call the roll for reconsideration for item 16B?
Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson,
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
No.
Horatio,
No.
Walker,
No.
Kennedy, Manning,
Yes.
Jackson,
No.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
No.
It fails.
Thank you. That brings to item
Chair,
16, report of the Rules and Appointments Committee.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Dickerson, is that Ms. Dickerson?
Yes, this is Ms. Dickerson. I was just going to let you know that that concludes my report and to let you know that this was a difficult time because we did not have time to discuss these items in an A and F committee. So that's why we had to send things, forward them on to full council so that we could move these items. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Item 17, the report of the Rules and Appointments Committee, the Honorable Bill Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 17A, notification of appointments, A1, 17A1A. Historic Columbia has one vacancy. There was one applicant, Mr. C. Carroll Hayward Jr. The committee recommended to appoint Mr. Hayward Jr.
You heard the committee's recommendation. Any discussion? There being none, Ms. Roberts, can you call the roll for item 17A1?
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes, yes,
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
passes.
Thank you. Mr. Malinowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 17A2, CMRTA has one vacancy and one applicant. Mr. Roger Leach asked that his interview be postponed until the next committee meeting as he was unable to attend today. But in addition to this, the committee, because of a change that took place at the last council meeting, which changed the actual makeup of the committee from 2 citizens and 1 council member to 2 council members and 1 citizen, the committee feels that future appointments should be held until staff, Ms. Dickerson, who's currently appointed there and has been for a long time, meets with the CMRTA to determine if there's any preferred criteria they would like to see in the people appointed to that board. So that's what the committee would like to know, if that would be the will of the council.
You heard the committee's recommendation to not move forward with this particular appointment, and because the person was not interviewed, and they also want to get some feedback from the comment. It's
Mr. Chair, may I second that motion?
yes. I would assume that was a committee recommendation, but I take that's a motion.
That's
Did
correct.
you
That's right.
put that in the form of a motion, Mr. Malinowski?
Yes,
Because
that was a motion and committee recommendation. That's a motion. That's fine.
okay, well, I second
Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? Now I'll ask Ms. Roberts to call the roll.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
it. Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Myers, Newton,
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
it passes.
Mr. Malinowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 17B. In my continued decade-long battle for accountability, transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness, I move that all county council standing committees, ad hoc committees, and one-time short-term committee meetings be held in council chambers, as is the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee, with votes recorded in like fashion. That motion came from Mr. Manning. The committee, after reviewing this, it was determined that the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee did not always meet in council chambers, is not necessarily, from my understanding, guaranteed to always meet there. And because of the fact that the committee recommends that meeting locations be determined on a case-by-case basis, since some meetings, they overlap other ones that have begun. Chambers is utilized for other purposes as well and may not be available. So on a case-by-case basis, the committees should determine where they will meet, and that's the committee recommendation.
So you heard the committee's recommendation, discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Jackson, recognized.
thank you. I think that one of the critical problems has been, my experience, that we have in other locations than the council chambers had difficulty making sure that the public access was a part of the committee meetings. And I think the ability to have that access is critically important for people to be able to hear. And it also helps in dealing with misinformation as a result of it not being live recorded and live streamed. And so if it's not going to be the recommendation of the committee that it be held in chambers, I would like to ask that it be wherever the meetings are held, that the ability for them to be live streamed be a part of the format of that meeting, so that the end result accomplishes, in my opinion, the same thing, and that is for full transparency that I hear so many people talk about, but this is an opportunity for us to demonstrate that we would do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, if that is a substitute motion, I would second it.
That is one, Mr. Walker. Thank you. I would like to move that, Mr. Chair.
Now, I'm sorry, since I didn't realize it was gonna be a motion, can you tell me what that motion is again?
I'd be happy to. I move that if the recommendation of the Rules and Appointment Committee is upheld, that we require staff to live stream all meetings wherever they are being held, if not in council chambers.
And Mr. Chair, I would again second that motion.
Mr. Chair.
It's a moving properly second. Ms. Newton, you recognize? And then Ms. Malin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. That's certainly a recommendation that I would support. I know that the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee isn't being live streamed currently, to my knowledge, but I just want to also make our council members aware that one of the other items that we are discussing in the Rules and Appointments Committee that was held because of time actually puts in the rules the live streaming of all of our council meetings. So that is something that the Rules and Appointments Committee is working on. So we can address it here through this motion, but that is also in progress and to be placed into our rules. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And keep in mind, this clearly says, I'm sorry, Ms. Malin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also think that we need to get staff input as to the difficulty, if there is any. I'm not technically oriented to know what it will take to live stream from one of these other rooms where we hold these meetings. If somebody can answer that, fine, but other than that, I don't have any idea what it takes. Is there a lot of equipment, a lot of manpower? What's needed to do it? And maybe we need some staff input on that as well.
Well, Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
Ms. Malin, you through?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Teresa.
It would be my assumption that we would just open up, say, a Zoom feed and do exactly what we're doing now. So I wouldn't assume that, unless we really want to improve our production value for some reason, that there would be any special or extra equipment required.
And I would suggest that it's important to let staff come back and tell us if there are any particular concerns, issues, or whatever. Since we're talking about all committees, whether it's an ad hoc committee meeting, whether it's a short-term committee meeting, or whatever, we need to at least know what's going to be expected in terms of staff.
Mr. Chair,
I have, go ahead, Mr. Dickerson, and then Malinowski.
I'll wait for Mr. Malinowski.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Dickerson. Go right ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that when we come back with these recommendations, that we have some kind of a budget assessed to them, so we'll know exactly how we're going to, we need a budget, whether or not we need a budget. Because I do know, like, say, for instance, today we have like maybe 3 meetings going on prior to our council meeting. So I just need to figure out, for staff to bring me back an assessment on how much I think this would cost to run this particular item through live stream, or can we find another way to do it? I'm all for the transparency, but I just need to know how and the cost of doing this particular item. Thank you.
Ms. Malin, then Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Ms. Dickerson 100% on that. I also think that what we're doing is possibly trying to pass a new council rule here that may not be needed 1 month or 6 months from now. There's no guarantee we're all going to keep sitting at home and doing these meetings via this computer, and we won't get back in council chambers for these meetings, and that the committee meetings won't be held in the various rooms that we have. So with all that, and on Ms. Dickerson's comments, I think we should send this back to committee until we get some of these financial answers and staff input on the possibilities or difficulties in doing this. I would make a substitute motion.
And what was the substitute motion?
Substitute motion would be to follow, as Ms. Dickerson says, to get some financial input on this, along with the possibility or difficulties in doing just what Mr. Walker and Mr. Jackson are asking.
And I second that motion.
Motion moving properly second to send it back and get feedback from staff regarding costs and pretty much logistics.
Correct.
Go ahead.
May I be recognized?
Substitute motion?
I second the substitute motion for discussion, and I'd like to be recognized, please.
You are?
Because when we're looking at this, depending on the setup that we're going to have from our IT department, then we may have to look at rescheduling and reassigning these committees. The time may have to change on these. So, I mean, that might be a lot of things that might have to take place in order for us to get this done, depending on depending on the outcome of what staff can bring us back in the cost.
Thank you.
Because some of these meetings, I mean, like say for instance, economic development is 5 o'clock. And I mean, if you streaming that and we got a 6 o'clock council meeting, you're gonna have a time from one to the other. So that's my point. We may have to rearrange some of these meetings.
Thank you. My concern would be logistics of all of it. I would want to better understand the logistics. Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am in support of Mr. Malinowski and Ms. Dickerson's substitute motion to get additional information. And again, I just wanted to say again to our colleagues that this is a rule that is right now under discussion by the Rules and Appointments Committee. So sending it back to the committee and having us get this information just supports that process that we're actually trying to enshrine in our rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, what's before us is a substitute motion made by Ms. Malinowski, second by Ms. Dickerson. There's no further discussion. Ms. Roberts, could you call the roll for the substitute motion?
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning,
Abstain.
Jackson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
passes.
Thank you. That brings, we had an item 7, I think 17C, and that was an item regarding transportation. You got that, I think, in the separate document. I'm gonna ask staff to present that to us for now.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. John Thompson here. So for this particular item, the Department of Transportation is asking to transfer money from one project to another. The reason being that with the road resurfacing package Q, there are 46 roads in that package, and the contractor is 5 months ahead of schedule. And we want to make sure that we pay the contractor timely. And we don't have any additional funds in this particular budget line item for the resurfacing package Q until next year. So again, we want to pay the contractor for the services rendered, and therefore we want to transfer money from one project, being the Atlas Road Widening project, to resurfacing package Q.
And I have Livingston and Mount Allison. One real quick question. Will this affect the timing of any other projects?
No, sir, not at all. No, sir, not at all.
All right, thank you. I have Ms. Mount Allison, then then Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Thompson.
Sir.
Says in our agenda briefing that the project requiring the budget transfer is 5 months ahead of schedule. So you mean to tell me that 1 month ago or 2 months ago, somebody didn't realize that we were going to need to transfer funds?
This should have been discovered months ago, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you. And that's why, because it's technically, again, a violation of our rules because it wasn't provided according to the agenda that we're supposed to have. And once again, we've got people, plain English, not doing their job and then are rewarded by getting their work on an agenda and voted on. The only reason I will support this is because I do not believe that we should be holding up contractors' funds after they've done something for the county. Thank you. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Newton? Ms. Newton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have discussed this before, but if staff could just refresh my memory what the process is that we use once we transfer funds from one bucket to another bucket to ensure that we then return it where it needs to be. I know that we have a process. I just don't recall. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized? John Thompson here.
Yes, Mr. Thompson, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So Councilperson Newton, so next fiscal year, we'll take the money that we're reprogramming from the Atlas Road widening project to the resurfacing package Q. For next fiscal year, we will return that money to the Atlas Road widening project. And so it'll make that project whole.
Okay, so that's an automatic process on a fiscal year basis, or do we also assess more frequently? And it just so happens that our fiscal year is near, and that's why we're going to look at it at next fiscal year.
It's just to make sure that we keep each project whole based on the budget we have for each project.
Yeah.
Okay, but hypothetically, if you needed to transfer funds for a project before the fiscal year, you would bring that before council. There would be a mechanism for you to know that and bring it before council for approval.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, welcome. Mr. Ratio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So generally I am in support item. I'm curious though as to why this funds would be transferred from the resurfacing projects to the Asteroid project. Wouldn't it be sort of within the same bucket of, in the same type of projects? So like another widening project.
So in terms of the referendum 039-12 HR, looking at the ordinance, there are 3 buckets. So one bucket is for roads, and one is for bikeways, pedestrian paths, and greenways, and the other one is for the Komet. And so in terms of from a budgeting perspective, we are keeping it in the same category.
Great, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Ms.
This is Julia Myers. Dr. Thompson, can I ask just a few questions about the transfer? The briefing document that we received does not list the roads that are in package Q. Can someone name those roads?
Is Director Niemeyer, do you copy?
Yes, sir. I'm here listening. The document typically wouldn't have such a list of roads since it is just requesting the budget transfer. The 46 roads are listed in the monthly report, which is currently on the webpage and should be a hard copy in your council document. I'm sorry, in your council box. I can.
So the reason that I'm
I can
asking
get them
is
to you immediately if you like, though.
Yeah, I'd like it posted. The last time we touched the penny project with anything that concerned any project that was in the Lower Richland community. I got a lot of blowback from people who have accused this council of rationalizing the penny program on the back of Lower Richland. And I want it to be clear that neither myself nor Ms. Newton is allowing anything close to that to happen. We are rationalizing money from year to year. And because that widening is not on task for this year and does not need the money now, there are 46 roads. I wish they were in the packet, but they're not. But I will ask you all to post this online. There are 46 roads that will be completed because we are transferring money to pay small contractors, some cases large contractors, whomever is actually doing the work so that they get timely paid and we realize a benefit, which is having roads finished 5 months early and still doing what we promised under the referendum. And I'd just like it to be clear that just because we are shifting to make an early payment, we are not taking away from any projects in the Lower Richland community, and that this council is committed to that community as it is to other communities. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the chair of the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee, let me join my name to the two names that were mentioned with regards to anyone rationalizing the moving of funds from one district to another. And certainly as the chair of the Transportation Committee, Ad Hoc Committee, I'm not doing that either, number one. And number two, this is not, for those who asked a question about it, this is not the first time a transfer has occurred where a project, we've done this since I've been involved with transportation for 2.5 years, where projects finish early and we need funds sooner than the budget would allow because we're not into the next fiscal year yet. We move money to pay those projects that have finished early with the documentation that when the money does come in, it automatically goes back to the accounts it was moved from. So any insinuation that that doesn't happen automatically or that there needs to be some double check, that's a fiscal financial responsibility that happens automatically. So let me go on record also saying that there has not been any attempt by the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee to realign funds either from projects that have not yet started. And you can be assured that once those projects begin, those funds will be there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Dickerson.
Mr. Chair.
You reckon, Ms. Dickerson, you recognize?
Yeah, I want to go on record is that with that as well, because you know how I feel about the upper Richland County in the Cedar Creek and along those areas where we have a lot of, there's been a lot of transfer, and I want to go on record with Ms. Myers, with Ms. Newton and Mr. Jackson regarding any transfer of funds that may or may not affect District 2. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Any further discussion? There being none, I'm going to ask Ms. Robinson call the roll.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir. I'd like to go on the record too. Thank you.
You're on the record, Mr. Mann.
Mr. Chair, I need to make a motion, sir.
Can the motion be repeated?
I hadn't made one, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the recommendation that's been presented to us by staff.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moving proper second. Any further discussion? There being none, I'm asking Ms. Roberts call the roll.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Dickerson.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Kennedy. Manning.
Yes.
Jackson.
Absolutely, yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Mr. Chair, I move to reconsider.
Second.
Motion reconsider and properly second. Ms. Roberts, could you call the roll for reconsideration?
Malinowski.
No.
Dickerson.
No.
McBride.
No.
Livingston.
No.
Teratio.
No.
Walker.
No.
Manning, Jackson,
No.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
No.
It fails.
That brings to item 18A, COVID-19 pandemic relief grant update and award recommendations. Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I'm going to have Assistant to the County Administrator, Shia Myers, address that matter with the body. Ms. Myers?
Good afternoon, council. I'll draw your attention to page 175 of your council agenda. Instead of going through this page by page, I'm just going to give a high level overview of what's included within that information. We had 30 new applicants since the May 12th status update. That was as of May 19th that we had those 30 new applicants. That second round per se of applications closed on May 18th. And by closed, I mean that's when staff pulled them to have them reviewed. Many of our nonprofits, the focus of their funds have been in the area of homelessness. And for small businesses, our largest category was for salons and barbershops. Also, largest category was minority owned. And overall, what we are seeing as indicated in the report itself is that there has been a decrease in the size of our businesses. So whereas there may have been one that had 16 to 50 employees, they have decreased in size and the number of employees due to COVID-19. The committee has made its recommendations for funding, and those are also included in your agenda packet for your review. And we've also included for your information other resources available for COVID-19 funds to our community members. Are there any questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair?
Chair is muted. You're muted, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Ms. Myers. You're right. Ben Jackson, then Malinowski, and then Manning.
It's good to hear your voice, sir. With regard to the chart that you all have provided, thank you, on pages 206 and I think it's 207, well, listing the businesses, 206, okay, in our documents. Thank you for listing them out in terms of small business or nonprofit. For future reference, is it possible to have the addresses so that we can ascertain, whether or not they're, I know that they're supposed to be all in the unincorporated parts of Richland County, and I trust that that's what's happening, but it would be nice to be able to look down the list and see that. And then with regard to the nonprofits, there are several of them that just are, and the small businesses, several of them that are just at $10,000. Is there some rationale where they just in need of greater funds than we could provide, and so that number was assigned, or how did you get there?
So, Ms. Myers, to answer your question, regarding the nonprofits, we funded up to 10,000, and that was the standard, the most frequently requested amount. If you notice, that would have been on page 179 of your agenda regarding the nonprofits. For small businesses, how they were awarded.
Ms. Myers, you said we funded up to $10,000, but there's one that's listed at $99,500.
I said most requested was 10,000. That's why you would see most of them as having that $10,000 amount.
Okay, unless I'm mistaken, we have one on the list that's recommended for $99,500.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. However, I was saying most of the nonprofits, not all of them, most. I apologize if
okay.
Yes, ma'am. So that one is that one has requested a greater amount of funds, but the most requested amount was 10,000. Yes, ma'am. And by most, I mean most frequently. Let me make sure I clarify that. Did that answer your question a little bit better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I apologize.
Clarification, please, Mr. Livingston, Bill Malinowski. That doesn't answer my question. I see what Ms. Myers is asking. It's $99,500 is what they asked for.
Yes, Ms. Malinowski, I said.
And what we're recommending.
And that's what we're recommending.
Right, I was saying the most frequently requested amount, not the most overall requested amount on the list. So the most frequently requested amount among the applicants was $10,000. That's on page 179, but referring to the list itself, yes, that particular entity did request 99,500, and that is the recommendation of the committee. And
Okay.
that's on the fact.
Mr. Malinowski, do you mind if I finish, or do you need to ask some clarifying questions before I finish?
Now I have Jackson, Malinowski, and
No,
Madden.
my hand's down. I'm sorry.
Okay, let me just, do I need to finish now, or do you need me to wait?
Go ahead, Ms. Myers.
Okay, so with regard to the one that requested $99,500, for me personally, I would like to see some more information as to where they're providing relief, because that represents a large portion of what we have available to give.
Right.
And I'd like to be clear that they are reaching more agencies, people, entities than could otherwise be reached by smaller grants. Thank you.
Ms. Myers, Ms. Kiefer can provide more information regarding their, Chris Kiefer over the CGS department can actually offer insight into their particular application and why their award recommendation amount is so high.
Is she available to offer that, since you're asking us to vote?
She should.
Yes. Hi, this is Chris Kiefer. I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Our understanding on the nonprofit grant review committee was that there was no cap on the amount of grant money that they could ask for, unlike the small business grants. So basically what happened in the case here is they had actually asked for far more than the 99.5 that's being recommended. What the review committee is recommending was to cover what they classified as program expenses to serve what they estimated to be 65 households in some of the most vulnerable populations in the county. Those are like zip code 29203, 29223, and 29210. The bulk of these funds are to be used to provide rental assistance, utility assistance, and help with mortgage payments, as well as to help restock the food pantry at the cooperative ministry, where people just, when they come in and they need food and they can't get it anywhere else, they provide food for them. So this was, from the committee's perspective, this was exactly the kind of relief that we understood council wanted to provide. We also found out from looking, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, ma'am, please continue.
Okay. And we also found out we kind of explored to see if they were getting funding from other sources as well, especially since Midlands Gives was going on at the same time. We did find that in this case, they did receive some additional grant funding for COVID-19 relief through Midlands Gives, and they did note that they were actually serving more families and households than they anticipated, and most folks are coming to them right now because of COVID-19 impacts. So for all those reasons, the committee felt that this was a very valid grant request and that it was serving a number of people with the exact needs that y'all were hoping to fulfill.
I have a.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I'm sorry, I was muted.
Go ahead.
So you're saying that they will serve, you said 65 families?
Per week, yes, ma'am.
Per week, okay, that 65 families.
Nice. I'll put that number too.
Yeah, it's $1,500 a family, and there are lots of families who are in desperate need. So they're serving, you said 1,500 families per week, but only in those zip codes?
There were several others. I just mentioned the ones that we all know have some difficulties. I think they mentioned 29204 and 29205 as well.
So I'd like, with that grant money, the only thing that I'd say is, and I'm not stating their names because we're not stating anybody else's names, but obviously we all know who they are and that they do a great job. But I'd like to have some instruction that they reach out to all other zip codes, because I'm going to tell you that the ones that you mentioned, yeah, there are people in real need there, but there are other zip codes where people are in desperate need that go beyond those areas. So if we're going to give that much money, because it represents nearly a third of where we started, I'd like to be sure that it's going to touch every family in Richland County, or at least they can come in and apply. Every family who needs it is aware that we have made this huge donation in their names, so that if they are in need, this is where you go. So I'd just like to make sure that we are challenging them to make sure that their outreach is effective. Well, at least not as narrowly targeted, but that it is broadcast. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have Malinowski, Newton, and McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify what I thought I heard Ms. Myers say in the beginning of her comments, and that was that all of the funding provided by the county was supposed to be used in unincorporated Richland County. Was that correct, Ms. Myers?
That's not true.
That was my understanding, sir.
And that's what I thought also, but there's a chart on page 201 that says 35% is being utilized and incorporated.
Mr. Malinowski, this is Ashia Myers. Mr. Livingston, may I be recognized?
Yes.
Council actually came back and said that because the point was raised that because the individuals who lived in incorporated were also taxpayers and should also be able to receive some of these funds, that the majority of the funds should be allocated towards unincorporated, but that did not mean that people in the incorporated areas were ineligible to receive funding.
Okay, thank you for that answer.
We're still under the number, though. It's still not the majority.
Well, and also then, do we have any way of assuring that these people aren't, I guess, using the term double dipping, so to speak, because the city's also giving money, and maybe we don't care. I'm just wondering, they get from the federal, the state, from different municipalities and Richland County. Is this something we're following up on or not?
Well, Mr. Malinowski, the grant applicants did have to sign a statement basically indicating that they would not, quote unquote, double dip when they sign their application agreements.
Okay, and do we know if in the cities, if in what the city is doing, has the city provided any funds to the unincorporated area, do we know?
Not to my knowledge, sir. I have included the information regarding what was available on their website within this packet as well.
I saw.
Yes, sir. But also as a note, we also are coordinating with several other entities that are doing this type of grant funding, to include the City of Columbia. So we do exchange information regarding if an entity has double dipped or not.
Okay, and is there any reason that the group that we're using here, I'm looking at page 209, Ms. Ashia Myers, that it says that this Midlands Community Response Fund was established in March of 2020. I mean, that's only 2 months ago, probably a month and a half before we decided to make funds available. You mean there weren't any other groups already established that could have been used?
But we're not using them. This is just to show you what other resources are available in the community for other people to use. That's not county funded at all, sir.
Oh, okay. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
But as a note, I wanted to, regarding the distribution of funds across the county, 65% of funds recommended to be distributed go towards unincorporated area for small business fund distribution, and 35% of funds go towards the incorporated areas of the county.
Okay, well, while I have you, I appreciate all this information you gave us. Is there any way I can get another copy that doesn't cut off the left side and a lot of the information there?
Yes, sir.
Smaller fonts, that's all.
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to get that to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'd like to have that as well.
Ms. McBride, you recognize.
Yeah, I think Ms. Myers addressed some of my concerns about the unincorporated area. I would not have voted if it had not included both unincorporated and incorporated. Additionally, even in the incorporated area, there was only a minimum amount of dollars that were able to go out. So only a few people received funding. So I'm glad that we had the wisdom to include both incorporated and unincorporated. The other area of concern is that I'm having difficulty, and I'm a grants person, in following the matrix. Is this a conclusive summary? Does this include everybody that applied?
No, ma'am. If you will,
go ahead.
There are over 400 applications in total. We just gave you the ones that were recommended for award.
Yeah, well, I would like to look at, because I'm sure that you had to review all 400. I would like to see the background work of all that applied and see who was funded and who was not funded. It's interesting. I mean, you know, it's something that I can just look at, but it's not giving me any information to vote on other than who you recommended. And I don't know, we don't have any idea about what these people will be doing or anything. So it's not enough information for me to make a decision or a good decision. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'll make sure you get that information.
Any further discussion? Chair, entertain a motion regarding the staff recommendation regarding the grant. Chair, entertain a motion. Staff recommendation.
Chair, I move to approve.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Properly second. Any further discussion? There be none. I'll ask
Mr. Chair, yes,
Ms.
one thing.
Myers,
I'm going to vote in favor. Thank you. I'm going to vote in favor of this because these organizations need the money. For future reference, I would ask the staff to provide more backup information and also to consider the recommendation we made earlier today about having the names of the people on that committee provided to the council and perhaps involving at least one representative from the body on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, you recognize.
Yeah, just quickly, I want to sort of related to what Ms. McBride said. I looked at the sheet and I noticed there weren't any barbershops, and there were several hair salons, but not one barbershop. And my guess is, I don't know personally, so let me just clear that up. I don't know anyone personally that applied, but I would automatically assume that since even the governor and everyone has been talking about barbershops as being one of those categories and groups of folk we wanted to help, I thought it was a little odd that not one barbershop made the cut on the list. And that's just a comment, not anything to do action on, but I wanted just to make that comment. I noticed that there were not any barbershops on this list approved to get any of these grants. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to follow with Mr. Jackson's question, Mrs. Jackson's comment. Receive any applicants from the barbers? I'd like to see that list as well.
That's a good point. I mean, I've gotten any, that's true.
Yeah. I'd like to know whether we received any applicants from any barbershops.
we'll get that full list. Any further discussion? If not, Ms. Robinson, call the roll.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Dickerson.
Yes.
McBride.
I'm going to vote yes, only because I don't want to hold up these people needing the funds to continue receiving them, but I do have major concerns. Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes. Same as
Walker.
Yes.
Kennedy. Manning. Jackson.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Mr. Chair, I move to reconsider.
Second.
Reconsideration is properly second. Ask Ms. Roberts, call the roll for consideration.
Malinowski.
No.
Dickerson.
No.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
No.
Teratio.
No.
Walker.
No.
Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
No.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
No.
It fails.
Thank you. That brings us to item 19, executive session. We had one personnel matter.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Brown, you recognize.
Yes, sir. So if it is the will of the council, my recommendation is going to be to follow the recommendations presented by the grievance committee. So unless the council wants to go and discuss that or has a problem with that recommendation, then the executive session may not be necessary. But I want to share that with you in case members of the council want to know whether or not I thought executive session was necessary.
Okay, Mr. Mallon, you recognize. And then Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Normally, we get all this information in our agenda packet of the interviews, the grievance committee recommendations, and I don't have anything here. If it's the one item I saw that came via email.
Yeah, we received all that. I did get all that.
You did get it?
I read it.
Yeah, well, there was an email that came. I didn't realize that we were voting on it, and I was going to take my time and look at that later in the week. So if that's what it's about, it didn't say that that was an agenda item that I recall. So based on the fact I don't have that information here, and if it's the one that was in the email, not wanting to mention any names, I'd move for a deferral. But prior to making that motion, I'll let Mr. Walker speak.
Mr. Walker, you recognize.
Recognize Mr. Malinowski. In all due respect, my motion was going to be for adjournment. So if deferment is appropriate for the item.
Yes, sir. Mr. Brown, does deferment create any problems as far as where you are with this item?
No, sir. It just delays information, but no, sir. Other than that.
Hey, Mr. Brown, is that the item that we got on the email about the one employee?
I'm not sure, sir.
Yes, Mr. Malmaster.
Okay, well, I'll read that and be prepared for the next council meeting. If my colleagues decide to defer it, I'd make a motion for deferral on that.
Make a motion to defer to the next.
So the motion is for deferral to next council meeting, Mr. Malmaster?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I support that.
Is there a second to that motion? Dixon, you second?
Second it, yes.
Okay, it's moving properly second. And there's none available. Ms. Roberts, call the roll for the motion for deferral on item 19.
Malinowski.
Yeah.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Dickerson.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes, ma'am.
Kennedy. Manning.
No.
Jackson.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Passes.
Motion passed. I did have before we get to adjournment, I did have a item for motion period, but it was a separate sheet on a separate sheet that I do not know what happened to it. Ms. Roberts, do you have that item? I thought there was a separate sheet.
Yes, sir.
Motion period.
Yes, sir, I have it.
Can you read that for us?
Yes, sir. Direct the administrator to have Richland County staff, in conjunction with the solicitors and/or magistrate's office, provide financial assistance to individuals wearing any type of court-ordered monitoring device. Richland County is providing assistance to businesses and individuals who suffered financially due to the pandemic. Those individuals are also affected financially. Courts have been closed or operating at less than optimum levels, and those individuals who would have had their case already heard would not continue to incur these expenses, submitted by Councilman Malinowski.
Okay, I'll refer that to ANFRJ, or which one? Who wants it? I refer that, we're talking about those folks who are detained, correct?
That go to DNS.
Yeah, that's correct.
We'll take it at the detention center ad hoc. We'll take it.
That's,
Okay.
because we're talking about the detention center, aren't we? Folks, so yeah, detention center committee.
Thank you, Ms. Myers.
Are you going to be?
You're welcome.
Are you going to be meeting Ms. Myers?
Yes, sir. We will meet to handle that. Yes, sir, Mr. Malinowski. Yes, sir. We understand.
Mr. Chair.
Anything else come from that? I'm referring that to the detention center committee. Anything else before the body?
Has the county received any care funds yet for COVID-19?
The pandemic is in your city. Do you have your arms around it?
Mr. Brown, did you hear that question?
I think we do.
Yes, sir. I did hear that question. No, sir, we have not received any direct funds from the CARES Act. No, sir, we have not.
Cautiously.
But we have applied for them.
Only because people made the sacrifice.
There are a couple of items where we were trying to get funding that we had not received approval for funding from the CARES Act.
Okay, so we have an application in, but we haven't received approval. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that there are a couple of programs that we've applied for that have CARES Act funding related to them, where those programs were not able to receive funds from the CARES Act.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion for adjournment, is there a second?
Second.
It's moving proper second for adjournment. Ms. Robinson, call the roll for adjournment.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
A big yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes, ma'am.
Kennedy, Manning, Jackson,
Yes. Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank everybody so very, very much, y'all. It's such a wonderful group to work with.
Joyce Dickerson is leaving the meeting.